Welcome to the Greener Way podcast, a show about people, planet, and purpose, and how investors and corporate leaders push forward in a complex world. Dr. Patrice Newell, thank you so much for joining us on the Greener Way. Can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Great to be here. Love talking about sustainability. I'm Patrice Newell. I come from a diverse background. Many years ago, I read news on SBS, then co-hosted the Today Show, before finally moving to the rural sector where I've been managing a property, and I've written books about agriculture, organic, biodynamic agriculture, and also done my PhD, in fact, on the development of a new bioenergy technology called slow pyrolysis. And all of a sudden, it feels like that now, but over 2 years ago, a group of us got together to talk about money and driving money to better sustainable businesses. And it's had an evolution. The process has had an evolution, but eventually we established Kwala, and it is an investing app for anybody interested particularly those who've not done it before, starting their investing journey and only want to be involved in sustainable and ethical companies.
So how does this actually work, Patrice? And why did you choose to go through the venue of creating an app for personal investment in sustainable and ethical investments?
I don't want to talk about all the things Kwala could have been, but in those early conversations, I'm not a fan of offsetting as a principle. There was a lot of talk about making the communication for people easier. Okay, how they were able to do things more easily, so that because everybody is on their sustainable journey, we live in a climate emergency. Everybody is witnessing that in all its different forms. And where do you start? If you're just going about your ordinary life, it's hard to step into the space to feel that you are doing more for yourself and more for your community. So in those early stages, we did quite a lot of surveys. And what we found was people were upset, bearing in mind this is after the Royal Commission into Banking, and people are cheesed off. They're not happy. There's no trust. They're annoyed. And out of that came, well, can you help me? Can you help us here? How do we know? Do something. I don't want all those nasty companies in it, and I don't want to have banking shares, and I need something different. And can you please keep it simple? Please keep it simple, because I've never done it before, and there's so much information and I'm confused. And what started from that original survey was, hey, we can get this right to communicate to people who feel they've not had access to a product to become participants. So that was the start.
Take me through how Kwala works, Patrice, and how do you seek to bring sustainable, ethical impact investing to the broad Australian market?
The great thing about living in a digital world now is there are other tools that we can use. I have never invested in shares, and the reason, right, I'm new to it, so I'm like the benchmark in the Kwala team, because everybody else had a share portfolio except me. And so why didn't I ever have one? Well, I never had a finance conversation in a family. My family and my friends, all my relatives, no one ever had shares when I grew up. So there were never conversations about it. How do my other co-founders? They lived in a world that was different, more learned, where there was excitement attached to the idea of owning shares and a comfort in that process. But most people, you see, don't actually have portfolios. So how do you get into it? Well, you have to understand a few basics. You have to have the confidence to do it. But I did learn one really important thing from my parents, and that is to live within your means. And that is something that I think when you've grown up without a lot of money, you tune into that. There's a different psychology and a different level of worry. So you tend to not be, you're not a risk taker. You need to feel a different level of comfort. Now, I think what is exciting about Kwala and the world today, the digital world today, is that only now can we have products, can we use a smartphone and actually do it cost effectively. In the past, you needed to have a mate who was a stockbroker. You need to have a relationship. Every time you did a trade, it cost you money. Whereas now, what Kwala has done is put together up to 200 companies. There's 13 direct investments and there's ETFs, so these clusters of companies. We've put them together and said, this is Kwala One Fund. So it's one fund. Anybody who invests with Kwala just makes, we're all invested in the same thing together. And we've gone through the process, our investment committee, to analyse these companies, to say this meets, something that is we're proud of, most of all, but something that everyone can be proud of. Every Kwala investor can be proud of. And they start small.
I want to come back to something you just said before, Patrice, and bring in a little bit of your very personal history. You mentioned before that one of the benefits of growing up the way you did is that you learned to live within your boundaries and within your means. And I think that's something writ large that we as a planet are dealing with in terms of planetary boundaries and how we treat the earth on which we live. Can you bring a little bit to the discussion about, your history, being a biodynamic farmer, being in remote and rural Australia, and how this influences what you bring to the table as a co-founder of Kwala?
Well, living within your means, I used to say always in agriculture, the land itself must define its use. Because what always happens in the agriculture sector, people go, oh, I've just bought this bit of land, and they want to impose on the farmer, so often wants to impose on that land whatever that takes their fancy without the consideration of the constraints of the environment. And of course, the extraordinary thing, even the latest State of the Environment report, comes out to show basically since colonial occupation, we have had just a rape and pillage of our environment. And it is witnessed on every farm everywhere across Australia today. There's erosion, we've lost soil, we've had a huge interruption with water function. And this is because capitalism has allowed us to take no notice of nature, no notice of the commons. And so suddenly, all of a sudden now the conversation has become, hey, this matters. We are part of nature. We're part of the environment. The environment is not separate to us. So I certainly bring that to all the discussions.
And how will you engage with the users of Kwala and the investors in Kwala? Because this is a conversation I love having, particularly with individuals, in terms of bringing them along that path, in terms of educating on, where their dollar goes, what it means to invest in the particular companies and products that you've put into the mix for the One Kwala Fund.
Okay, first of all, it's not one lesson. It's not one conversation. And this is part of us saying to customers, hey, start small, just start the investing journey so you learn along the way and feel the strength of it as you go forward. So we hope, and we will, have lots of articles, conversations that we're participating in, and we'll share them with the customers so that a Kwala customer can learn across the board. I mean, we're all learning. It's not like us in the team, we're learning. I mean, it's pretty dynamic, new ideas, new thinking, new benchmarks, new standards that we're going to have to adhere to. So there's a lot in the space. One of the things that I have found since we've been developing Kwala, it's quite often information overload. And we don't want to do that because we feel it too. Some days it's just like you can't read another report. So it's important. And we hope we digest it. And I think as a writer, less words is often better.
I feel that on so many different levels, Patrice. I think, to me, the State of the Environment report that got released earlier this year really does stand out as sort of that really big, 5-alarm blaring emergency call as to, how we're not living and not living within Australia. When you talk with people who are considering using Kwala or who might have just gotten started with Kwala, what sort of questions do they tend to have?
It's really varied because I have felt overall someone who's never done any that I feel their nervousness is the first thing. They don't know the names of the companies. What are these companies? They don't know the names of them. And in the app, all of them, even every company in the ETF is there, so you can just click on it and look and think about it and do other research, as you go forward. And the other thing is, when it comes to, I guess, the global transformation that we are all wanting to be participants of, it's not just one thing. It's not just energy. So it's not just wind farms or solar panels. It's every single thing that we're building. And that's why we've embedded our analysis with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as the bedrock, really. And so each company is against that. And they say, well, why have you got that company there? And I say, well, if you look in the app, you can see, okay, they might be doing something with glass, but they've got really good gender balance. They've got lots of great work they might be doing in Africa, so it's helping poverty. So there's different things that companies can focus on, not just climate, but are part of the climate solution. So the question, I guess you did ask, what do they ask, is simple questions like, why is this here? And, how do I do it? And I'm nervous. Can I get out if I need to quickly? Absolutely. Have a go and start small. $10 a week. Start small and feel your way into it.
It's interesting, isn't it? The questions, the questions are the most basic. What's the transparency? How do I know that what I'm investing in is what I intend to invest in? I think that's a question that a lot in the industry grapple with, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, we want them to trust Kwala, but a new product, people don't know us. And I don't think trust isn't something that happens straight away. When you meet anybody, it is something that you earn.
100% agree with you there. In terms of the companies that do appear, Patrice, you name check the fact that they're selected in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think have been such a fantastic framing device and narrative device for talking about so many of these values. How then do the companies, after their alignment is selected, how then do you go about affirming that what their revenues and their products and services are in line with the SDGs and any other sort of investment or impact criteria that you've developed?
Well, we work with and use the services of Sustainable Development. Okay, so they're, a company. They're data scientists, sustainability experts and developers, and they have been developing a data reporting platform now for over 8 years. And that has been fantastic for us because the 1,900 Australian companies on the stock exchange are in there under review, and they've now covered, 98% of the world's market capitalisation. So there's a lot of companies that they've got in their system. Now, I always say data isn't knowledge. Data isn't information. Information isn't knowledge. Knowledge isn't wisdom. So just because you've got data, it's what you do with that data. But you have to start with it. And they align everything with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that was perfect for us because we were in that space. So we use the companies and then they break it down on where they are in terms of that framework, the sustainable goals. So that's, then of course there's our own. They also cover things like, well, where are they with reputation, fines, greenwashing, stranded assets? So all of that is included in the data. So, and we're always checking it. See, that's the other thing. People change, companies change, companies are made by people. So it's not like this is what it is today and it will be forever thus. New technology comes on, companies have a change in management, things change. So the process is very much alive, I suppose. And then with the investment committee, we meet monthly. The two advisors, one's been a chief investment officer, the other is managing a portfolio. All of us have a foundation in land management and the sustainable issue with land management and resource management. and we all have our unique, specific interests, I suppose you could say, and then our advisors have the final say. So they have been, as fund managers, get the final say, but the three of us work through the particular choices that we have in the portfolio.
Very interesting. And then one final question, Patrice. When you look ahead 5 years, 10 years, what do you see for Kwala, for its users?
Well, I hope they become excited participants in feeling they're participating more in a market economy. Because at the moment, I think it feels like it's out there and they're sitting here and it's all happening without them. But we have an opportunity now, through technology, to own a little bit of these companies. We are actually investors in the companies making the changes for the future. And I think that for someone like me who has not had shares, that's exciting. I feel like they're not a bogey out there anymore, and I have some say. And so there's a level of empowerment that can come from it.
Fantastic. Well, on that, I think we'll leave it. Dr. Patrice Newell, co-founder of Kwala, a title that I think is just only one small part of an amazing and diverse life experience. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Greener Way podcast. If you liked today's show, remember to rate and review us on your podcast platform and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Any feedback? Contact us on podcast@fssustainability.com.au. I'm Rachel Allen-Backus.
The Greener Way podcast is a product of FS Sustainability, a show about people, the planet, and investing in our collective future. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The Greener Way podcast gives listeners access to information and educational content provided by discussing numerous financial sustainable options and our featured guests. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of The Greener Way are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. FS Sustainability operates under an Australian Financial Service License and the exemption made available under the Corporations Act 2001 in respect to any information or advice given. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website, fssustainability.com.au.